The first time I met Billy 45 years ago, he was cast to play my best friend. And I have to tell you, Billy is really my good luck charm. Billy is in 3 films that I made. And all of those films are in the National Film Registry. So, Billy, because of you, the moment word spread that Rob Reiner had passed, Hollywood froze up like someone hit pause on the whole town. Conversations slowed. Rooms went quiet, and even the loudest spaces felt heavy out of nowhere. It wasn't chaos or shock screaming for attention. It was that deep sinking stillness that creeps in when something real just ended. This was the mind behind stories that made people believe in connection, loyalty, and heart again. And yet his goodbye came without noise or spectacle. No grand exit, just a quiet gap nobody could fully explain. Even those closest to him struggled to put a clean name on the loss. His farewell was held far from cameras, tucked inside a small Brentwood chapel, away from flashing lights and industry eyes. Inside, there were no press rows, no scripted lines meant to land well, just white flowers along the aisle, candles trembling slightly, and the people who actually mattered standing close, shoulder to shoulder. Everyone thought it would end in silence until Billy Crystal slowly stood up. He didn't rush, didn't play to the room, didn't even speak right away. He stood there head down like he was weighing whether he could even get the words out. When he finally spoke, his voice came out rough, breaking halfway through. He admitted Rob had leaned on him in his final days and that he didn't realize just how deep things really were. That's when the room locked up completely. This wasn't a polished farewell. It was a late, raw confession that caught everyone off guard. Rob had been carrying weight quietly, slipping past the people who loved him most. And now that truth had nowhere to go but sit heavy in that room. Friendship doesn't reset after moments like that. Regret doesn't loosen just because time moves forward. And just days after his passing, his name started surfacing again. Not loud, not dramatic, but heavier than before. There were no big statements, no public breakdowns, just closed doors, late-night calls, and private conversations where nobody talked movies anymore. The same people who once debated scripts kept circling the same question. Why him? Outside noise kept buzzing. But inside that chapel, everything stayed sealed off. Candlelight spilled across dark wood. White flowers hung in the air, and silence pressed so tight it felt louder than words. No whispers, no shifting, no escape. Just a small room holding the weight of Rob Reiner's absence. Calm on the surface, crushing underneath it all. The back door crept open, slow and quiet. And Billy Crystal stepped inside, without looking around at all. No scanning the room, no taking it in. He moved straight ahead like one wrong glance might crack something he was barely holding together. The only thing keeping him grounded was a simple bouquet of white flowers tied neat and held tight in his hands. Tucked between the stems sat a small card folded and unfolded so many times its edges were creased and worn. You could tell those words had been wrestled with before he ever walked in. Every step felt heavy, shoulders slumped, grip tightening and loosening like he wasn't fully sure he could make it to the end. It was hard to tell if that weight came from years catching up to him or something deeper pulling him back. When Billy stopped in front of Rob Reiner's portrait, he froze there. Not a polite pause, a long, loaded standstill that made the room feel tense. He looked torn between stepping closer or turning away, stuck between accepting it and refusing to let it sink in. Finally, he plaqued, aired the flowers at the base of the frame, adjusted the card carefully, then turned toward the front. No notes, no safety net. He reached the podium and took the microphone as the room dropped into total silence. Billy stood there unmoving, bracing himself. The man known for making people laugh now stood face to face with grief he couldn't dodge. He pulled the mic closer, took a breath, and said softly, "I hate having to do this because if I'm standing here, it means Rob is really gone." No drama, no performance, just truth landing heavy. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Everyone felt it at the same time. This mattered. The first time I met Billy 45 years ago, he was cast to play my best friend. From that day on, we've been best friends. And it's worked out pretty good. Billy paused, eyes down, then looked up slowly. He said Rob never tried to take over rooms or pull attention. Rob just existed in a way that made people feel steady, safe, and seen. And if you ever truly needed him, you never had to chase. Rob was already there. You really had to know Rob to understand him. He lived by quiet habits, steady routines that almost never changed. If he said he'd call, it was always right on time, never early, never late. 8 o'clock meant exactly 8 every single time. And after every show or appearance Billy did, Rob would always send a short message. No build-up, no extra talk, just enough for Billy to know Rob had seen him and was still there. Rob always asked the same question, "Are you okay?" And Billy made it clear that wasn't some automatic check-in. Rob actually waited for the answer. If Billy stayed quiet, Rob didn't rush him. If Billy admitted he wasn't okay, Rob didn't jump in trying to fix anything. Billy explained that plenty of people in his life wanted to pull him out of sadness fast. They pushed advice, motivation, and tough talk. But Rob never moved like that. Rob didn't tell him to toughen up or hurry past the feeling. He was patient, steady, and comfortable sitting in silence without pressure. As Billy said this, his grip on the microphone tightened just slightly. Rob never tried to erase the pain or cover it up. He didn't rescue Billy from it either. He just stayed. He sat beside him long enough for Billy to breathe again on his own terms, in his own time. When that landed, the room went heavy. Nobody shifted. Nobody looked away. Everyone knew this wasn't some rehearsed moment anymore. This was real, pulled straight from somewhere deep Billy never planned to open publicly. Well, since you're here, I legally have to ask you something about a movie that came out 35 years ago, When Harry Met Sally. Speaking of great things, Harry, here it is. Here it is. Came out. It's now a holiday that everybody watches at the holidays. They want to get it leading up to the New Year's Eve there. Everyone's got their favorite moment from that movie. Mine is when Bruno Kirby says, "You made a woman meow, and I just can't believe how dumb that is, and I love it." May I ask what your favorite moment is from the movie moment or a line? Either way, yeah, there's a close-up. Thank you. I came here tonight because when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with someone, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. Slowly, Billy turned toward the row where Rob's family sat. He didn't lock eyes, but his voice softened. He said Rob was never standing alone behind him. There was always family. There was always Michelle. The place Rob returned to after long days where laughter didn't have to be loud to be real. Billy let one sentence fall and left it there. If Rob was the laughter the world heard, then Michelle was where that laughter came to rest. He bowed his head toward the family. Quiet, respectful, no drama. Then Billy faced forward again, and his voice dropped even lower. The memories slowed, and one thing he tried to avoid couldn't stay buried anymore. Billy shared that he still had one unread message from Rob. Just a short message. They also still had plans. Nothing big, just a meal next week. And there was one simple sentence Billy kept putting off, telling himself there'd always be more time. He stared into the empty space ahead and said quietly, "I thought we still had time." Then even softer, "I'll let later steal it." When Billy stopped, he closed his eyes for several long seconds. The room stayed silent. Not forced, not planned, just because no one knew what else to do in that moment. Billy's pain didn't stay contained anymore. It spread across the room, sitting heavy where everyone could feel it without a single extra word. And in that moment, Billy realized there was a part of this story he'd been avoiding from the start. But staying quiet about it wasn't an option anymore. He stayed standing, not rushing a thing. You could tell he was weighing whether what he was about to say even belonged in that space. When he finally opened his eyes, his voice came back slower, lower, carrying a different kind of weight. He said there was something Rob once told him never meant for anyone else. But today it needed to be said out loud, not to judge anyone, not to point fingers, just so people could understand the kind of man Rob really was. Billy explained that Rob hated complaining. He never wanted to turn personal struggles into someone else's burden. If he could carry something quietly, he always chose silence. And I have to tell you, Billy is really my good luck charm. Billy is in 3 films that I made, and all of those films are in the National Film Registry. So Billy, because of you. So there you go. In this and final cut, he only had one line. He played Morty the Mime. Then in The Princess Bride, of course, he was Miracle Max, and yes. And he told us that the greatest thing in the world was true love, except for a nice MLT, a mutton lettuce and tomato sandwich when the muffin is nice and lean. It's so perky. So that was The Princess Bride. And then along with Meg Ryan, and When Harry Met Sally, not only was he great as Harry Burns, but Bill wrote what I believe is maybe the funniest line in all of movie history. I'll have what she's having, said by my mother. But there were nights, late, heavy ones, when Rob would call, not to vent, not to demand advice. Sometimes there wasn't even much talking at all, just long pauses on the line, the kind where someone only needs to know they're not alone. And after sitting in that quiet, Rob would start asking questions that caught Billy off guard. Nothing about movies, nothing about work, nothing about Hollywood. He asked about being a father, about watching your child grow and change, and not knowing how to keep them close without pushing them away. One night, Rob asked straight up, what is a father supposed to do when it feels like his child is slowly slipping out of reach? That's when Billy realized Rob was talking about his son, Nick Reiner. For years, Nick had been dealing with substance struggles that pushed the entire family to their limits. They kept trying together, holding on to hope, even when it felt thin. Nick had entered rehabilitation 17 times. And while none of those attempts brought lasting stability, Rob never treated any of them like the end of the road. To him, the number didn't matter. What mattered was never believing that one setback meant it was truly over. Billy didn't go deep into details. He didn't need to. He said Rob had seen too many almost moments, almost peace, almost stability, enough to understand that the deepest pain wasn't the setback itself, but the helpless feeling of a father who couldn't take the suffering away. After every collapse, Rob asked himself the same question. What did I miss? Where didn't I do enough? And Billy made it clear. Rob never spoke with anger or blame. He spoke like a father walking a tightrope, scared of saying too much, scared of staying silent too long, just trying to love his child the right way. Billy realized Rob's real question was never about control or fixing anything. It was about making sure his son knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened, he would never have to fight alone. Billy said whenever Rob talked about Nick Reiner, there was never anger in his voice. No bitterness, no blame, just fear. Not fear of headlines or public opinion, but fear of making one wrong move that couldn't be taken back. Rob admitted there were good days. Days when Nick was clear-minded, steady, speaking sharp enough to make him believe things might actually be okay. Those moments gave Rob hope. But there were other days, too. Days when he couldn't tell where his son was mentally, couldn't read what was happening behind his eyes, and didn't know if stepping closer would help or make things worse. Billy explained that what drained Rob the most wasn't anger. It was helplessness. The nights wondering if Nick would make it home safely. The fear of late phone calls that freeze your chest before you even answer. The constant replay of questions. Did I say enough? Did I miss something that mattered? And as if that weight wasn't heavy already, Rob shared something even harder to admit. He worried about money and inheritance. Not out of greed or distrust, but fear. He was scared that giving Nick everything too soon without the right foundation might not help him stand stronger. He feared it could pull him deeper into struggle instead. Rob told Billy that thinking about it kept him awake night after night. Not because he didn't want to leave anything behind, but because he didn't know how to leave it the right way. His love. The painful idea that love by itself might not always be enough to protect the child you care about more than anything. What hurt Billy the most was knowing Rob carried that fear quietly and alone. He never turned it into blame, never used it as a reason to pull away. He stayed. He kept calling, kept showing up, kept waiting. Rob truly believed that as long as he remained present, his child would never be completely lost. But with time and hindsight, that fear Rob tried to push aside didn't fade. It grew heavier, turning into a question with no clear answer. Standing there at the farewell, Billy realized something painful. Rob didn't live his final years guided by love alone, but by a constant quiet anxiety with no easy way out. Billy then shared a sentence Rob once said that never left him. I can direct everything on a film set, but I can't direct my son's life. The words hung heavy in the air. Rob had wondered out loud whether there were moments he laughed off when he should have paused longer, asked more questions, or stayed just a little more present. Not dramatic regret, not loud guilt, just a man replaying moments in his head, searching for the one scene that might have changed everything, knowing deep down that some things can't be rewritten. No matter how badly you want another take, Billy made one thing absolutely clear. Rob never abandoned his son. Not once. No matter how heavy things became, he stayed. He kept calling. He kept hoping. Not blind hope or denial, but the steady hope of a father who believed presence still mattered even on the hardest days. As Billy shared these memories, Rob Reiner no longer felt like a Hollywood figure or cultural icon. He appeared as something far more real. A father carrying a fragile, deeply human fear. A fear anyone who's ever loved a child would recognize instantly. Billy said if people remembered Rob now, he hoped why do you remember this? Not perfection, not answers, but a father who did his best in circumstances that were anything but easy. A father who fought through presence, love, and refusal to turn away, even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. When Billy placed the bouquet down, time seemed to slow for just a second. His hand let go, but his eyes stayed locked there longer than necessary. Like letting go physically didn't mean letting go emotionally. And to understand why Billy nearly folded under the weight of just a few sentences, you have to go back to where it all truly began. Because to Billy, Rob Reiner was never just a name in film history, never just a director behind the camera. To everyone watching, Rob Reiner was a legend. But to Billy, he was something closer, heavier, more personal, and impossible to replace. Rob had witnessed nearly every chapter of Billy Crystal's life. From the early days when Billy was still searching for his voice to the moment he finally understood who he was meant to be. They met long before fame was locked in. Back when recognition wasn't guaranteed and success wasn't promised, same generation, same timing, same quiet rhythm. Their comedy didn't lean on noise or cheap laughs. It came from watching people closely and understanding how real life actually feels. Rob never saw Billy as just a comedian chasing punchlines. He saw someone who could say out loud what people already felt but didn't know how to express. And Billy never saw Rob as just a director calling shots. He saw someone who could take small, everyday moments and turn them into cinema without stripping away warmth or humanity. They could debate for ages. One word, one pause, one beat of silence. But those arguments rarely turned tense. Most ended in laughter and that shared understanding that being right didn't matter as much as being honest. That connection showed itself plural. While when they worked on When Harry Met Sally, Rob stayed behind the camera, steady and quiet, protecting the rhythm of the story. Billy carried that rhythm straight to the audience through tone, expression, and silence that spoke louder than words. The film didn't survive on shock or spectacle. It lived in dialogue that sounded simple but hit deep fears about love, loneliness, and growing older beside someone else. To many, it was just a romantic movie. To Rob and Billy, it was proof they understood each other without explanation. After that, life pulled them in different directions. Rob kept telling stories he believed in. Billy kept acting, hosting, and making people laugh his own way. They didn't work together as much, but the bond never broke. It was the kind of friendship that didn't need constant contact. One call was enough. One sentence, I need to talk, and the other always showed up. Not to fix things, not to solve anything, just to sit right on time, to listen, ask one simple question, and then sit quietly if silence was what mattered most. That's who Rob was. Over the years, their friendship shed all the shine and glamour. No parties, no public moments, no shared photos, just presence. And that's exactly why when Rob started worrying about his son, Billy was the one he called. Not because Billy had answers, not because he could fix anything, but because Billy wouldn't turn fear into gossip or pain into a headline. He would keep it where it belonged, protected, private, and human between two friends who trusted each other fully. People love to say Hollywood friendships are calculated, that they're built on opportunity and status. But Rob and Billy never fit that mold. They didn't need each other to climb higher or get louder. They needed each other to stay grounded. Rob knew Billy before the name carried weight, before it opened doors or filled rooms. He was there during the quiet stretches, the uncertain, on moments when Billy himself wasn't sure he was enough to keep going. That's why at the farewell, Billy didn't break down because a public figure had passed. He broke down because the man who had walked beside him for decades, quietly, steadily, without ever asking for attention, was no longer in the room when he placed the bouquet down. It wasn't just goodbye to a friend. It was deeper than that. It was Billy saying goodbye to a chapter of his own life, a version of himself that only existed because Rob had been there to witness it. The moment ended the same way it began, in silence. No applause. No one stood. The room stayed still like everyone knew noise didn't belong there. Billy gently placed the microphone down, careful, almost cautious, like he didn't want to drop anything else he couldn't afford to lose. He walked toward the exit slowly, shoulders slightly hunched. Whether from exhaustion or from leaving too much of himself behind, no one could say. And that's how Rob Reiner's journey closed. Not under bright lights or cameras, but in quiet presence, surrounded by the people who truly walked beside him. Rob may be gone, but what he left behind isn't just films stitched into generations of memory. It's a way of storytelling rooted in kindness, sincerity, and deep humanity. From laughter to meaningful silence, Rob proved stories never needed a shout to reach the heart. The story Billy shared wasn't meant to sit in sadness. It was a glimpse into a life lived with care, intention, and presence. A man who knew how to listen, how to stay, and how to quietly support the people around him, both on set and far beyond it. Rob Reiner moved through life the same way he moved through stories with patience, empathy, and a steady belief in human connection. He didn't rush moments, and he never forced emotion. He trusted that if something was real, it would land on its own. So if Rob was ever part of your memories, if one of his films made you laugh, think, or feel comforted even for a moment, this is your space to say goodbye. Drop a farewell in the comments, and let that memory live on. And if you want more real, deeply emotional stories about the people who quietly shaped cinema and culture, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who'd appreciate it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Turn on notifications, too, because the next story you see on screen is already waiting, and it dives even deeper into celebrity moments you won't hear talked about anywhere else. I'll see you on the next one.